how do you get someone to do something that you want them to do? And even more important, how do you get somebody to do something that you want to do that is in their best interest to do it, but for whatever reason, they don't really want to do it? So for example, let's say you've got somebody who their job is to do X. You really want them to do X plus this other thing, but their job really is to just do X. And how do you get them to do that extra thing on top of this? So when I was, just a real quick story, when I was between my first and second years of my MBA, I worked for a newspaper, and I was given the assignment to help them solve the $5 million every year that they were losing in paper that was being thrown away. And there's a whole bunch of causes that were in that. I went through and did a study and figured out all the different reasons why. But ultimately what it came down to was how the pressmen, the people who were running the press, actually did their job. Now, the press operators were paid to get the paper out on time every single day. And there were certain things that they just did as a matter of habit that enabled them to ensure that they would get the paper out by that time every day, that literally resulted in the waste of about 4.2 million of those $5 million of paper every single year. And so I looked at it, I worked with them, I talked with them and did everything. On top of all this, this was a very tough union group, and they didn't want any management. I got threatened. Literally, my life was threatened several times just for having conversations with them. And so it was a tough situation to get them to do that. And when it came down to it, what it really came down to was I needed to come up with an incentive program that rewarded them for doing a little bit extra and working a little bit harder at something that wasn't really in their job description. Their job description was get that newspaper out on time every day, and get them to save paper on top of that, when some of the things I was asking them to do to save that paper actually put at risk their real job. And that was tough. And so I looked at several things. And by the way, one of the things that you can do when you have this kind of situation, whether this is employees, whether it's people taking your course and you're trying to get them to complete that course, or whether it is you yourself who you really want to do something, is one of the things that tends to work is acknowledgement. Acknowledging people in public, in front of their peers, for having done a great thing. And that really works well. This is the reason why leaderboards work. This is the reason why when you go look at the MLM business, they'll have every month, here's the top producers, and they get them up and they all clap for them and they do silly, stupid songs and those kinds of things. That's all part of this acknowledgement. And it's really a powerful element, this acknowledgement piece. But very frankly, it goes about this far when you need to go this far. So acknowledgement is great, but many companies try to do acknowledgements because it's free, when they really need to fork out some cash, which is the next piece of the incentive program. So in this particular case, I created a program that gave back to the press operators 20% of everything they saved. And at $4.2 million, 20% meant they got back right around $1 million. It was 60, turns out, when I say guys, it literally, every one of them was a male. And so at the time, that was what it was. And so I can say 60 guys to split basically about $1 million between themselves. This is some serious cash for many of them. And so to come up with a cash incentive was an incredibly powerful element. And I've never forgotten the last day, my very first day of work. I'd run press all my life. And so since I was 12. And so I was up inside the press. And one of the big burly guys who had come from when Katharine Graham shut down the union at the Washington Post, he came down and started working at this particular press and brought a bunch of his compatriots along. And so literally these were the people who burnt the printing presses at the Washington Post, who held the who held the managers, the supervisors at knife point and at gunpoint in the factory. This is the kind of person. And he walked up to me and he picked me up by my collars. And at the time I weighed about 140 pounds soaking wet, picked me up, threw me against the running rollers of the press and says, "You get out of my press. No management ever comes in my press." I said, "I'm not management. I'm here to give you stuff." And we had a running battle where it's like every day I walked into his press. Every day he threatened my life if I didn't get out of his press. The last day, when 2 days before, I'd given him a check for $120,000 and the set of golf clubs that he always wanted. He walked up to me, picked me up by my collar, threw me up against the wall of the press and said, "You can walk in my press anytime you want." Totally changed the way these men at the time operated. All of a sudden, they realized how much advantage, and they started thinking of ways to save paper as opposed to fighting management about saving paper. They've been fighting this battle for 20 years. Now, let's take this and apply it to not a tough union environment. Let's take it and apply it to yourself. Let's just imagine for a moment that you are trying to get yourself to get up an hour early and work out. What incentives could you give yourself to get yourself to do that? Well, one of them could be cash. You could literally promise yourself that you're going to take X dollars out of your business and pay yourself if you achieve that. And by the way, here, let me give you another element. So basically, this became the equivalent of my master's thesis, was my experience in working with this. And so I studied this deeply. And one of the keys to make this work is you can't have it be wishy-washy. And so one of the keys that you should do to make this really work, if you're trying to do exactly what I just told you, let's say you decide to write yourself a check for $500. If you get up every morning this month, so let's say 20 days this month, and work out for an hour before your work starts, all right? Here's what I suggest. Take that $500, give it to someone else. And if at the end of the month you have achieved that, you get the $500. If not, they get to keep it. So you don't get it back. It's money that's gone. That way you're combining a reward and a potential punishment in this equation. And you're putting an outside party who's not going to let you weasel in this process. What you're doing here is you're kicking in like 5 different elements that I could take you into the master's thesis level kind of thought on how we do all this stuff. But you're executing all 5 of those all at once simply by take the money, give it to somebody else. They can cash it if you don't qualify. If not, you get it. Cash. Here's another thing, special food. So it could be that you do something where you say, okay, my favorite meal is blank and it's not too unhealthy. And so if I get up this week every single morning and work out, on Friday, I get to have that special meal. Or maybe it's I really like this one dessert. And so Friday is going to be my cheat night and I'm going to have this one dessert and it's my favorite. And so I have a special food. This especially works with kids. So if you're trying to get your kids to practice every day without griping, you do, okay, Friday night is pizza night. If every one of you successfully does your practicing every day without griping. If not, we're having spaghetti, ideally something that they don't like nearly as much as pizza, okay? So special food can be a wonderful, wonderful reward, especially with kids and with yourself. And by the way, I can't tell you how many times in my career I went at 3 o'clock in the morning and served hamburgers to the night shift as they came off the shift to reward them for getting a launch of a new product out on a certain time, get it shipped at a certain time, or bought pizza for everybody who worked in such and such a marketing department or the production department or whatever. Special food can do amazing things in this process, both with yourself as with others. Here's another one. Give them time. So if you were to, let's take an employee. So, hey, if we do X, you get Friday off this week with pay. With yourself, you could say, okay, so let's say that you really, really love to go sailing. You're so busy, you haven't got time to go sailing. And so what you do is you say, okay, if I do X on Friday at 3:00, I'm taking off and going sailing for the rest of the evening. Totally works. A great way to do this. Time as a reward. Another one, experiences. I bet you almost all of us have had an experience reward at some point in our lives. So let's say you're doing this with your family. Okay, if we all do X and whatever that X is, we're going to Disneyland this summer. And if you're going to do that, then I suggest you actually put together tracking sheets and point systems. And when we as a family earn 5,000 points, then we're going to Disneyland, whatever that is. But that's a great experiential example. Here's another experiential example. You, to influence yourself, decide that if you do X, whatever that X is, you're going to go do this adventure that you've always wanted to do, but have never treated yourself to doing that. Okay. I want to go on a balloon and fly over the town, whatever it is. And that's a great experience that you can use personally. You can use it with employees. I one time was talking about all this to a boss of mine, and he owned a very fast, fancy car. I'm not a big car person, but it's one of those cars where it's like, hey, I would like to drive that. And what he basically did is we went to a convention and he said, whoever sells the most gets to drive my car. And I tell you, I sold the most. I got to drive his car. It was a lot of fun. I got it going to illegal speeds, and it was a lot of fun. And that was a good experiential way that me as an employee got motivated to do better in order to get that experience. Another experiential example is to take everyone in your company to Cancun or deep sea fishing or whatever, if certain things happen. All right, here's another one. They don't have to do something. This works great in a family. So if you, child, do this, you don't have to do your job of clearing the table and loading the dishwasher tonight. It works great with spouses, by the way. Same thing. Don't have to do something. So ideally, it's something that person or that group of people don't want to do, and you can make it so that they don't have to do this. We all experienced this in third grade, where it's like, hey, if everyone's good today, then we don't have the spelling test before we go home. And everybody goes, yay, I don't have to take my spelling test. And off they go. We've all seen it work. It does work. Here's another one, gear. So gear can be anything from... and I'll just combine this with this one, clothing. So gear and clothing. So it can be, hey, you get the faster computer that you want. You get the fancy backpack. You get the whatever. You get the t-shirt. You get the jacket. You get the clothing. And maybe it's clothing without the logo on it, even better. This can be incredibly powerful for some people who's like clothing's an especially important thing for them. It's like, okay, taking you shopping, we're going to buy. So maybe it's you and your spouse need to get up every morning for a month and work out together. And it's like, okay, if we are able to do this, we're both going to go shopping. We're going to get you a tux. We're going to get you a gown, and we're going to go out dancing, or we're going to go out to the fanciest restaurant on New Year's Eve or whatever, that kind of thing. Now, we do have to acknowledge the other side of all this, which is punishment, which is withdrawing certain things that people want. Personally, this is powerful. This is very, very powerful. I prefer to do rewards over punishments because rewards, you can always amp them up. Punishments, once you get to a certain point, you end up going to jail if you keep doing them. And so rewards tend to have a much higher level of value, especially from a morale point of view, than punishments are. And so here's my question for you. What incentives have you found work for you? What incentives have you had someone try on you that worked for you? And what incentives have you done with yourself, with your family, with your team, with your customers to get them to do things? Let me give you a couple of other examples. For a number of years, I've used a thing called Crowther Cash. So here's the way it works. If you complete all the modules in this course on schedule, then you get $150 or $250 in Crowther Cash that then you are able to spend on any product that I have. Or you can use that to come to a live conference, or you can use that to deduct off of coaching fees, or whatever it is that goes into that equation. That's something I've done to help my students do something that they know they want to do something they know that they should do, which is actually complete the course that they just paid for. But sometimes it really helps to have that extra piece outside of it, especially if you stack onto that the acknowledgments of a leaderboard, the acknowledgments of the here's how everybody's doing so everybody can see, and put that competitive gamification piece into that entire equation. So gamification, you've all heard that term. It's an incentive program. That's all it is. It's just a fancy high-tech way of saying an incentive program. The challenge is that most people don't get incentive programs. They don't understand the power of them to motivate customers, employees, families, and yourself to do things. May I suggest that you spend some time this weekend, figure out something you really want to do, but struggle to do. Figure out an incentive that will work for you personally. Implement that in a written agreement with yourself. By the way, back to this is part of the science of it. A written agreement. Here are the conditions. Here's the rewards. Here's the punishments associated with it. And sign it and try it out on yourself this upcoming week. Let's see if we can start to change your world by using the science of incentive programs to make it work. Let me know what you're doing. Let me know what's working for you. Let me know what's worked in the comments. This is Don Crowther saying, just go do this stuff.